In this video, we're talking about LIDAR, or laser, and how it applies in a criminal case. This is a speed measurement technology that police will often use. It's in addition or in lieu of radar or some other technique that they use, but they use it very frequently in criminal speeding, reckless driving, racing cases. We're going to talk a little bit about how that works and where some of the holes are in a LIDAR case. So first of all, in a criminal case, the burden of proof and the amount of evidence that they can get in against you have different standards. They have to prove that you're guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, and a lot of the rules that don't apply in civil cases, like for a civil speeding ticket, all apply in a criminal case. And so we'll talk about what some of that means down here at the bottom of this board. But first and foremost, let's dive right into how LIDAR or laser works. They'll call it one of the two, LIDAR or laser. They're basically interchangeable. But the long story short is it's like a laser, just like you would see with a laser pointer. What the officer needs to do is they have a gun. It has two different lenses, and we'll talk about what each one of these mean, but there's a viewfinder at the top of it. So sort of like a sniper rifle or a gun, what they're doing is they're taking a gun and they're looking through the viewfinder so that they can paint what they see in there. It's basically a little red dot on a vehicle. They have to point it and place it right on that vehicle so they know that it's this vehicle. So from a law enforcement perspective, they're saying that this is much more accurate. So unlike radar, which shoots a big cone-shaped beam out there that can get radio frequency interference, can pick up multiple vehicles, and has other problems, LIDAR laser is a little bit more accurate because they know that they are pinpointing one particular vehicle, either the front of the vehicle or the back of the vehicle or the side of the vehicle. And so what they'll do is the officer will literally look through a viewfinder. They'll paint the vehicle with the viewfinder, and then they'll activate the device. And what we're looking at here is one device where one lens which is sending out the laser and another one that's picking it up. And so if you know that speed equals time over distance, so how long it takes something to travel over a certain period of distance equals a vehicle's speed, and we know that lasers operate according to the speed of light, and that speed is very constant. It doesn't matter what altitude you're at or what the weather's like or any of those things. The speed of light doesn't change. That's a constant. And so we know that the laser is traveling at the speed of light, and it leaves at a certain speed, and it hits the vehicle, and it goes back at a certain speed. And so it's measuring the distance and the time that it takes for the laser to ping the vehicle and bounce back into the laser. And so what we now know then is how long it took to do that, because we have it exiting and returning, and we can know what distance it is, because what the laser is doing essentially is it's sending many different laser bursts. So it's not just one laser, but it's sending hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them very, very rapidly. So it'll send this one out, and it'll know what time that one got back, and that one out, and it'll know what time that got back. And so what it's doing, it can say, if we send one at this time, and the vehicle's at this location, and it took long to get that back, and we send another one very quickly, and we know how long it took to hit the vehicle and get back, and another one very quickly, what it's doing is it's measuring the changes there. So in between each laser burst, it's measuring the distance of the vehicle, or it's calculating the distance of the vehicle, because it can tell you how long it took that laser beam according to the speed of light to hit the vehicle and come back. And by sending a ton of them very quickly, it can tell you how far away that is, because it knows how fast each individual laser beam moves. And so that's how it's gathering your speed. It's saying, we sent all of these laser pulses, it hit the vehicle and came back. We can now know the distance between this point and this point. We know how fast that vehicle's changing. So if the vehicle's going away, we know that each subsequent laser is taking longer to come back, or if it's moving towards the laser, it's coming back more quickly. And so it can calculate the differential between that, and then it can calculate the speed. So that's how that works. Now, the way that we defend against these are a lot of the same principles that we use in a radar case. So first of all of this stuff needs to be calibrated, calculated, it needs to be authenticated, it needs to be admissible. They need to have good documentation about how all this works, make sure that the officer is certified to use it. It requires a higher level of skill. So you can see here one of the main issues with laser and LIDAR is that it requires a higher skill. So not every single officer who actually is out doing traffic patrol is certified or capable of using this technology. You just can't pick it up and use it. You have to go and get specially certified. So some officers are not. Some also need to actually it's required that they calibrate these devices before and after every shift. So some officers will do that, some won't. But essentially what many officers that we've experienced will do is they'll just take that laser gun and they'll measure it at a certain distance. So one officer, for example, would go out before and after his shift, before he would go on duty, and he would take it and point it at the palm tree across the street. And he knew what that distance was because he measured it by hand. And so his argument was, I know that it's measuring distance accurately, and therefore it's working. That's how he calibrated it. Well, there's some arguments about whether that's followed the protocols and whether that was acceptable, but that's how he did it. So they are required to do that. Some of them don't do it. Some of them do it. The other thing is all of that documentation, so the officer certifications, any of the work orders that are associated with the laser device, all of the recalibration that needs to require based on the different agency, that all needs to be admissible. It needs to be authenticated. It needs to actually come into court against you. Otherwise, who can lay the foundation as to whether or not that device was working? All right. There are also times where there are issues with the line of sight. So if an officer is saying that he was at one location and the vehicle was at a different location, was it actually possible for him to complete this line of sight? Could he actually pinpoint your vehicle or somebody's vehicle through the viewfinder of the laser gun, and was that actually something that he could measure using his device? The other thing that is very common in these cases, especially at higher rates of speed, and I tied it back in here where it says higher skill, it requires the officer to be very quick on the draw. So if a vehicle is going very, very quickly, 100 miles an hour, the officer needs to be able to pick that gun up and actually paint the vehicle through the viewfinder going at that high rate of speed. And so sometimes that's not easy to do. So sometimes an officer will just say, well, based on my experience, based on my training, based on doing this for 10 years, I believe the vehicle is going 105 or 110. But they'll write on the ticket that they use their laser to do that. We'll get the body cam footage, or we'll get the GPS data, or we'll get some other evidence like video footage to show that the officer really didn't do what he said. So he actually may have guesstimated the speed, but didn't actually use the laser gun to do it. And that's a big problem. So visibility can be a problem if it's nighttime, if an officer can't actually see the vehicle, or he was presuming that he was measuring one vehicle's headlights, but he couldn't actually see the color or the make of the vehicle. That may be a problem because he can't articulate whether it was that vehicle or a vehicle right behind it or a vehicle in the lane right next to it. So there are a lot of different issues here. The point of it is that laser requires a little bit more higher skill. It requires a higher level of technical ability to actually pick up the gun and point it and measure somebody's speed precisely. It also requires additional certifications, and it requires additional documentation that needs to be admitted into court. So that's just a quick overview of how it works. There is a lot more to it, but if you've been charged with a criminal traffic offense, remember that all of this is relevant. It doesn't matter if the officer just said that he picked up a gun and used it. They've got to authenticate all these records. The officer has to have documentation that they know what they're doing. They know how to use this. It was actually functioning properly, that a prosecutor can get all of those documents admitted in against you and to the judge. And so there are a lot of ways that they can screw this up. So if they're just saying that you were going that speed, you can't take their word for it. You want to make sure that you really dive into these issues. A lot of firms don't do it. They just don't know what to ask for, or when they get it, how to analyze that material. Of course, we do. So if you find yourself in this situation, if you've been charged with a criminal speeding or a reckless driving or some sort of other moving violation, and on your ticket it says laser or LIDAR on there, this is how that works. These are some of the major problems with it. So if you'd like, you can give our office a call. We'll have you come by our office. We'll sit down. We'll talk about the specifics of your case, how any one of these errors may apply, and we'll put together a plan to make sure that you do not have this go on your record, to make sure that you are able to move beyond this, move past this, and not have a criminal conviction from a traffic ticket. Thanks for watching.